My parents borrowed money from my emergency surgery fund to buy a new car for my sister, saying, "You're young, you'll heal on your own." Years passed, and when I confronted them, my dad laughed, "It was just a scratch." So I sent them the bill for their retirement home. "You're young. You'll heal." That's what my mom said when I found out they'd drained the emergency surgery fund I'd been saving for years. The fund I needed to fix my hip dysplasia, something I've struggled with since childhood. My dad just grunted, "It's not like you're dying." But when I brought it up again years later, my dad laughed and said, "It was just a scratch." So I sent them an invoice. With interest. It started when I was 26 and living in Charleston, South Carolina. I was born and raised there, went to the College of Charleston, and stayed close after graduation because I was dealing with a chronic health issue, congenital hip dysplasia. It didn't affect my childhood much, but by my 20s, I knew surgery was inevitable. I'd planned for it. Saved for it. Every bit of extra cash from my part-time jobs, internships, and side gigs went into that fund. It was supposed to be my safety net. My parents, Marlon and Denise, knew this. We weren't poor, but we weren't wealthy either. They prided themselves on holding it together, which really meant living slightly beyond their means and hiding it behind a manicured lawn and an up-to-date SUV. Growing up, I saw how appearances mattered more to them than long-term stability. They'd max out a credit card for a new living room set rather than fix a leak in the roof. I was the middle child. Wes, my older brother, got the worst of Dad's moods and eventually left for the West Coast and never looked back. My younger sister, Brenna, was the golden child. She never had to ask twice for anything. My parents would bend over backward to keep her happy, even when she clearly didn't deserve it. That summer, Brenna had just graduated and totaled her car, texting while driving. She was fine, but the car was toast. I remember visiting home for the weekend and noticing a shiny new red Mazda parked out front. I figured maybe she'd gotten a good deal on a used one or took out a loan. When I casually asked about it, Mom smiled and said they helped her out. I didn't think much of it until I checked my savings account a few days later. Almost $12,000 was gone. At first, I panicked. I thought my account had been hacked. I called the bank, only to find out the withdrawal was made in person. At my parents' branch. I drove straight to their house. My mom didn't even look guilty. She was standing in the kitchen like it was any other day. My dad was watching TV. "We used your savings," she said, like it was some minor loan between friends. "Brenna needed the car more right now." "You're still young." I was too stunned to respond. "She needed to get to work," Mom continued. "And you're not even scheduled for surgery yet. Your body will bounce back." "You took my surgery money without telling me," I finally said. "I'd been saving for years. I'm in pain every day." Dad didn't even look up from the TV. "It's not like you're dying," he muttered. That was it. That was their justification. That because I wasn't on my deathbed, it was okay to rob me blind. Because Brenna was inconvenienced, my pain didn't matter. I couldn't look at them. I left. I went home, cried until my head hurt, and then started the long, bitter process of making peace with the fact that I'd have to start over. I didn't talk to them for months after that. I tried everything to avoid surgery: cheap physical therapy, foam rolling, stretching, heat pads, even acupuncture. But my hip just got worse. The pain started affecting my work, my sleep, and my mental health. I took freelance jobs on top of my full-time job, lived frugally, and started saving all over again. I was angry for a long time, but I never got a real apology. Not even an acknowledgement. Anytime I brought it up, they'd wave it off like it was old news. Like I was being dramatic. "Let it go," Mom would say. "Family helps each other." But no one helped me. I was alone in my pain, and in paying for it, twice. By the time I turned 31, I had saved enough for the surgery again. I scheduled it. It was cruel, and the recovery was worse than I expected. I had to relearn how to walk properly. I spent months on a cane, then a walker, and finally started walking on my own without pain. It was the most liberating feeling of my life. A few months later, I went to their house for Christmas. They were talking about retiring soon and mentioned wanting to tour retirement communities in North Carolina. I sat across from them at the dining table while Brenna scrolled on her phone nearby. "I never got paid back for the surgery fund," I said, out of nowhere. I couldn't hold it in anymore. My mom didn't even blink. "For what?" "The $12,000 you took for Brenna's car." "Oh," she said. "That. Well, it worked out, didn't it? You look great." Dad chuckled. "It was just a scratch. You didn't even need the whole thing." I stared at them. No remorse. No apology. Just a dismissive laugh. That's when it clicked. They were never going to take responsibility. Not for the theft, not for the lies, not for the pain. So I decided to stop asking. A month later, Dad called. They were ready to tour retirement communities and were asking if I could help them put down a deposit for one in Asheville. It was just a little help to secure the spot. I told them I'd be happy to send something over. And I did. An invoice. $18,450 itemized. Original amount taken, plus accrued interest over the years. I included documentation, payment instructions, and a short note: "This is what family does, right? We help each other. Once you settle this balance, I'll be happy to help with the retirement home." They didn't call back. Instead, Brenna did. Screaming. Crying. Accusing me of being cruel. Of trying to punish them over something that happened years ago. "You're overreacting," she said through tears. "You've always been jealous of me." I hung up. I didn't block Brenna, but I didn't respond either. I couldn't, not because I was too upset, but because I knew anything I said would be twisted into me being the bitter one. That was always the role assigned to me when I wasn't being quiet. I wasn't interested in playing that part anymore. The following weeks were oddly quiet. No texts from Mom. No voicemails from Dad. Just radio silence. I could only imagine the conversations happening behind closed doors. I'd cracked their perfect little image of a family that sticks together no matter what, at least to the outside world. But inside, they were probably furious that I'd put a price tag on their parenting. What no one really wanted to say was that it had always been transactional with them. If they helped you, they expected something in return. But if you needed help from them, it was somehow different. That meant you were weak, a burden. It was the same when Wes left. He'd asked for help with a down payment on an apartment in Seattle, and Dad basically called him a failure for not figuring it out himself. But Brenna needed a car because she'd totaled hers? No problem. Take the one thing your other child had worked for. Eventually, I started getting third-party updates. My aunt from Wilmington called to catch up and mentioned that Marlon and Denise had canceled their trip to Asheville. "It just wasn't the right time," she said. I didn't say a word. My cousin sent me a screenshot of a vague Facebook post Mom had made. It was one of those long, poetic guilt trips masked as wisdom. "Sometimes the people you raise forget how much you sacrificed. But God sees your heart, even when they don't." I didn't comment. I didn't message her. I let it sit there, getting sympathetic likes from her friends who had no idea what she'd actually done. By this point, I had returned to my routine. My hip had healed, mostly. I could walk again without limping, and for the first time in years, I didn't wince while going upstairs. My apartment in Mount Pleasant had become a refuge, quiet, clean, no reminders of what I'd gone through. I was focused on work, and Wes and I had started talking more. He sent me a box of artisan coffee beans and a card that just said, "You did what I wish I had the guts to do. Proud of you." It hit me harder than I expected. That's the thing about family dynamics, they don't fully unravel all at once. They fray slowly. You lose trust in pieces. You learn to tiptoe around certain topics, convince yourself that this is just how it is, until something snaps. And once it does, you start to see everything with sharper eyes. Growing up, I remember how often I was the one to clean up. If Brenna cried, I was told to be understanding. If Dad got angry, I was told not to provoke him. If Mom was overwhelmed, I was told to help. It was my job to smooth the edges, even when I was the one getting cut. And now? Now they were mad that I wasn't bleeding quietly anymore. I kept the invoice active. Send reminders monthly, just like a business would. No messages. No explanations. Just the standard email with a PDF attachment. I wasn't even expecting the money. That wasn't the point. The point was that they knew I hadn't forgotten. This time, they didn't get to rewrite the story. Then came the email. From Mom. No subject. Just a single line, I don't know who you've become, but you're not the daughter I raised. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I laughed. Because I was exactly the daughter she raised. Just no longer the one willing to break herself to keep others comfortable. After that email, I didn't reply. I didn't need to. There was a strange relief in the silence that followed. No more passive-aggressive texts, no more phone calls from Brenna, no more guilt-soaked updates from distant relatives fishing for details. Just quiet. For a while. But the quiet never lasts long in families like mine. Because once you upset the balance, once you stop playing your assigned role, everyone starts scrambling to reset the stage. A few weeks later, I got a call from Brenna's boyfriend, Tarek. I'd met him a few times over holidays, and while he was polite enough, we were never close. I let it go to voicemail. His message was long. Too long. He sounded awkward, hesitant. Hey, I hope you're doing okay. I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but Brenna's been really upset, and I just thought maybe if you guys talked, you could work it out? She's not herself. She misses you. Anyway, call me back if you want. I didn't call him back. What no one seemed to grasp was that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a fight about words taken the wrong way. This was about years of unequal treatment, of feeling invisible until someone needed something from me. Of working twice as hard just to be told I should be grateful. My parents never once called the surgery by its name. They called it "that thing with your hip," as if I was being dramatic about having a joint that dislocated with every wrong step. They never visited me in the hospital. Not once. I'd had my neighbor drop me off and pick me up after I was discharged. When I told Mom afterward how long recovery was going to take, she said, "Well, maybe that's a sign you rushed into it." I didn't even tell her that my surgeon had said waiting longer would have risked permanent nerve damage. I didn't see the point. That was always the thing with them, every time I brought facts, they brought feelings. And somehow, their feelings always outranked my reality. Spring has come. I was walking again, hiking small trails on the weekends, something I hadn't done in years. I was rebuilding. I hadn't heard from them in months, and part of me wondered if this was it, if they were finally done trying to convince me to let it go. But then Wes flew out to Charleston. We hadn't seen each other in person since I was 19. He stayed with me for 4 days. Brought stories, coffee, and that dry sense of humor I'd missed more than I realized. We talked about our childhood, about Dad's temper and Mom's emotional manipulation, and how we'd both been made to feel like disappointments unless we were doing something that helped the family look good. "You know," he said one night over beers on my balcony, "I used to think you were the lucky one. I left and got called selfish. You stayed, and they praised you for it. But now I see, they just leaned harder on you because they knew you wouldn't push back." I nodded. He wasn't wrong. "They never expected you to leave," he added. "I think it scares the heck out of them." After he left, I started thinking more about what scared them. Losing control, maybe. Losing the illusion of being a tight-knit family. Losing their power to guilt me into silence. It wasn't long after that when a thick envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized Mom's handwriting. Inside was a handwritten letter, 8 pages long. The first 6 were basically a memoir of all the sacrifices she'd made as a mother, the things she did behind the scenes that I never thanked her for. The last 2 pages were about forgiveness. Not hers, mind you, mine. She said she hoped I'd come to my senses and stop acting like I was above family unity. That it wasn't too late to fix this. That if I could just move on, maybe they could, too. She never once mentioned the money. Not once. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I just left it there. Like an artifact from another life. Proof that I didn't imagine it. That even when given 8 pages to make it right, she chose her pride. A few weeks later, I ran into an old neighbor at the farmer's market. Mrs. Kelsey, who used to watch us after school when Mom was working late. She was still sharp, still gossipy, and still somehow in the loop with everything. "Your parents aren't doing too well," she said casually as she picked over strawberries. "I heard they're thinking about selling the house. Retirement didn't quite go as planned." I just smiled. "Oh? That's too bad." She gave me a look. Not judgmental. Just curious. "They still don't talk to you?" "I wouldn't say that," I said. "I think we're just recalibrating." She laughed softly. "Well, sometimes distance is the healthiest thing, honey." I agreed. Not long after that, the invoice expired. I could have sent a new one. Could have hounded them. But I didn't. Because by that point, the money wasn't the point anymore. It was about principle. Boundaries. Taking back something I hadn't realized they stole long before the 12 grand. My self-respect. Summer rolled in with its usual Charleston heat, a humid, thick wall that hit you in the lungs every time you stepped outside. But I welcomed it. After the year I'd had, anything that forced me to slow down and breathe was a strange kind of gift. Life kept moving. I was walking almost normally again, working steadily, slowly putting down roots in my own quiet way. I started taking art classes on Tuesday nights, nothing fancy, just a little watercolor and charcoal, and began volunteering at the library once a week. Small joys. Peaceful joys. Things I never had space for when I was busy bending myself into someone else's version of a good daughter. And just as I started to forget to check my email for another possible outburst from my family, I got a voicemail. From Dad. That alone was unusual. Dad was not a voicemail kind of guy. He was a silent standoff type, the type to hold a grudge until the grave but never put words to it. Hearing his voice on my phone after nearly a year of silence made my stomach tighten. His message was clipped. Uncomfortable. He cleared his throat 3 times. "Hey. It's your father. I wanted to, talk. Your mom's been having some health issues. We'd like to sit down, maybe talk this whole thing out. Face to face." I replayed it 3 times. Not once did he say sorry. Not once did he say her name or specify what was wrong. Just health issues, said like a bargaining chip. I sat with that voicemail for a week before even thinking about replying. Eventually, I sent a short text, "I'm open to meeting. 1 hour. Public place." He agreed. No resistance. No pushback. We picked a little cafe halfway between my place and theirs, one with decent iced coffee and an outdoor patio in the shade. I arrived first and took a seat with my back to the wall, an old habit from years of keeping watch for emotional ambushes. I hadn't seen them in nearly 18 months. When they showed up, it was strange. They looked smaller. Not just older, though they did look older. Tired. Like the weight of years had finally started to settle on their shoulders instead of mine. Mom smiled tightly. Dad nodded. We ordered drinks, made awkward small talk about the weather, the construction on I-26, a mutual neighbor who'd recently passed. Then came the shift. Mom put her cup down, both hands clasped around it like a child waiting to speak in class. "We've been thinking a lot," she began. "About everything. About how things got out of hand." I said nothing. "Just wait." Dad exhaled hard, like even breathing during this conversation cost him something. "We weren't right to take that money," he said, glancing at Mom. "We thought we were doing what was best at the time. But it wasn't our choice to make." That was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard from him. Mom's eyes flicked to mine, and for once, there was no performance in them. Just something that looked like shame? Or maybe fear. I wasn't sure. "I know we hurt you," she said. "We thought you'd be okay. And maybe we were too proud to say it, but we were wrong." Another pause. The air thickened with everything they weren't saying. The decades of patterns, favoritism, expectations, disappointments. Then she added, "I haven't been well. Some heart stuff. We don't know yet." I didn't call because I didn't want that to be the only reason we spoke again. It took everything in me not to flinch. There it was again, tragedy, deployed as a wedge to reopen a door that they had slammed shut. "I'm sorry you're sick," I said slowly, carefully. "And I appreciate what you both just said. But I don't think a conversation fixes what happened." They nodded. No denial. No excuses this time. "I think we just want the chance to try," Dad said. "Even if it takes time." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just sipped my coffee and let the silence settle between us. They didn't press me. That was new. When the hour ended, I stood up and said goodbye. No hug. No tears. Just a polite ending to a polite conversation. A starting point, maybe. Or maybe just a full stop. Back home, I paced for a long time. I thought about Brenna. She hadn't reached out again. Not since her meltdown over the invoice. Maybe she was still stewing, or maybe she'd convinced herself I'd been brainwashed by Wes. Who knows? I wasn't holding my breath for her self-awareness. I thought about my drawer. The one where I'd kept Mom's long letter. I opened it that night and read it again, just to see if the words felt different now. They didn't. But they didn't sting anymore, either. And that was something. A few days later, Wes called. I told him about the meeting. "You think they're serious?" he asked. "I think they're scared," I said. Same thing sometimes. He wasn't wrong. He asked me what I was going to do next. I told him I didn't know. Because I didn't. And for once, that felt okay. Weeks passed after that cafe meeting. I didn't follow up. Neither did they. Not immediately, anyway. The dust needed time to settle. And I was content to leave it there, suspended, while I kept living my life without the looming pressure of doing the right thing for people who rarely did it for me. Then came the email. Subject: "We've been thinking." It was from Dad. Formal, almost transactional, like a business proposal. They were ready to make things right. He wrote that they'd spoken to a financial advisor. They wanted to offer me partial repayment for the money they took, plus a little extra as a sign of goodwill. No dollar amount listed. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. It was something, I'll admit. But it wasn't nearly enough. Not because of the money, although I wasn't about to forget the exact amount they'd taken. It wasn't enough because they were still doing it their way. Still deciding the terms. Still trying to control the narrative. So I did something I'd never done before. I decided to take back control. The idea came to me slowly. Not out of spite, exactly. Out of necessity. I needed to close this chapter on my terms, not theirs. And it started with a meeting. I invited them both to my apartment. Neutral ground. Wes was visiting again, and I wanted him there, not as a bodyguard, but as a witness. Someone who could confirm, if ever I doubted myself again, that this really happened. That I wasn't overreacting. That I was just done being the only one carrying the weight. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon. Mom looked more tired than usual, her eyes softer, like she knew she didn't hold the upper hand anymore. Dad was stiff, guarded. We sat in the living room. No small talk. I had already printed the invoice again. This time, I added something new. Balance owed, $18,450 compensation for emotional labor, medical delay, and lack of support, $6,000 family discount, $3,000 total due, $21,450 payable in the form of monthly installments or an immediate in-kind agreement to relinquish claim to my time, resources, and emotional labor indefinitely. They stared at it. Mom blinked. "You're serious?" I smiled. "Completely." Dad shifted in his seat. "What does that even mean, relinquish claim?" "It means we're done playing pretend. No more expectations. No more last-minute favors. No more retirement guilt trips or holiday manipulation. You're welcome to stay in my life, but I'm not your backup plan." They were silent. I let the words hang in the air like smoke. Wes cleared his throat and added, "She's not being cruel. She's drawing a boundary. The kind all of us should have had years ago." I slid a folder across the table. Inside was a letter I'd had a lawyer draft, not legally binding, just formal enough to make a point. It spelled out, in clear terms, that I would not be financially responsible for their retirement, elder care, or any debts unless I explicitly chose to be. No ambiguity. No room for misinterpretation. "You can sign it," I said. "Or not. But understand this, if you don't, we go back to silence. Not out of hate, but for my own peace." Mom picked up the pen first. No drama. No speech. Just a shaky signature. Dad hesitated, then sighed and signed, too. And just like that, the spell broke. In the weeks that followed, I held firm. I didn't chase them. I didn't initiate calls. I didn't explain myself to my extended family, who started murmuring about how I'd cut off my parents. Let them murmur. I was free. Then one day, the check arrived. Not a huge one, $5,000, with a sticky note from Mom in her familiar handwriting. "It's a start. We're sorry." Genuinely. I deposited it without hesitation. Not out of trust. Out of principle. They wanted to repay? Fine. Let them feel what it's like to put money towards something that matters. A few months later, Brenna called. Not screaming this time. Not even angry. Just, hollow. They asked me to help with their mortgage. I said nothing. They said I should step up since you're not helping. Still silent. Then, quietly, I told them no. That surprised me. "I'm tired," she said. "I see it now. Took me longer, but I did. We weren't friends yet. But maybe, for the first time in our lives, we were on the same page. Or at least in the same chapter. So here we are now." Mom and Dad still live in the house they tried to sell twice but couldn't afford to. They've downsized their lifestyle, started budgeting, even picked up part-time gigs, Dad at the local hardware store, Mom babysitting for a neighbor. And me? I'm free. Not because they repaid the money. Not because they apologized. But because I finally did what they never expected me to do, I chose myself. And it turns out, that was the best revenge of all.